For all the mystery that comes with every Nintendo Direct, Nintendo themselves, as a business, aren't that hard to follow. The company's split into studios that operate on a pretty consistent cycle, and the majority of the time it isn't hard to guess what they're working on. For example, there is a 3D Mario team and a 2D Mario team. The 2D team just released Mario Wonder last year, but the 3D team hasn't had a release since Bowser's Fury, alongside their port of 3D World back in 2021. So we can make a pretty reasonable guess that we'll have a 3D Mario game early on in the life cycle of the next system. The timing would line up, and it's likely Nintendo will want to replicate the rollout of the Switch as closely as possible. But then there are those lower tier titles that don't have a consistent or dedicated team pumping them out one after another. Games that will go for a decade without a new game only to suddenly reappear. This is the case for Mario and Luigi Brothership. I love that title, by the way. It was announced at Nintendo's June 2024 Nintendo Direct and was a complete surprise. Alpha Dream, the studio behind the Mario and Luigi series, famously shut down back in 2019, and the series itself hadn't had a non-remake entry since 2015, if you count the crossover title with Paper Mario. Otherwise, you'd need to go back to 2013 to find the last fully traditional Mario and Luigi title. Mario and Luigi, alongside Paper Mario, spun off from Super Mario RPG, making use of a similar, though not identical, combat system. Mario and Luigi ran concurrently with Paper Mario up through the end of the 3DS era, where Mario and Luigi saw a sharp decline in sales, with the final few entries struggling to keep up with even Paper Mario Color Splash, the worst-selling game in the Paper Mario series. Depending on who you ask, this may come down to RPG fatigue, a homogenization of Mario's look and style, or simply a drop-off in the actual quality of the games. And with a couple sub-1 million unit selling remakes to close out the series, it just sort of quietly faded away into nothingness. Then, something weird happened in November of 2023. We got a remake of Super Mario RPG. And while I was excited for fans of the game, I had to wonder, how would it actually sell? After all, if you look at the two series that Mario RPG begot, you see one that people just sort of stopped buying, and another that has thrived on Switch, but did so by kind of leaving all of its RPG trappings behind after the GameCube, and from a sales perspective, seemed to be the better for it. So would there actually be interest in a traditional Mario RPG? Well, there better be, because starting with Mario RPG on Switch, we'd get a total of 3 of them within the next 365 days. Super Mario RPG, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Mario and Luigi Brothership. From November 17th of 2023 through November 7th of 2024, the only Mario RPG series that will not have a new entry on Switch is Mario plus Rabbids, but that had a new game back in 2022, so we can cut it some slack. Now let me be clear, I am thrilled for fans of each of these versions of turn-based Mario. Mario and Luigi in particular is back, and it looks like it's returning to its unique art style that it lost on the 3DS. But is this perhaps a bit too much? As Nintendo suddenly seems very interested in bringing these series back, I'm concerned that they may immediately overwhelm the already niche audience for these titles. And I don't mean niche in a bad way, merely that from a sales perspective, these franchises sell to a relatively small portion of their audience compared to other Mario titles. Let's take that Switch remake of Mario RPG for example. As of their most recent earnings reports in May of 2024, Mario RPG on Switch had sold 3.31 million units. 3.14 of those were evidently sold by the end of December 2023, indicating a fairly steep drop-off post-launch. But to actually gauge what those numbers mean, we need context, something to compare them against. But the question is, do you judge Mario RPG as a Japanese RPG, or as a Mario game? If we do compare it to other Mario games, those numbers are a little rough. For example, Mario Wonder, the most recent 2D Mario, has, at most recent count, sold over 13 million units. And the same is true for Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Mario Odyssey, meanwhile, is sitting comfortably at about 28 million. But what if we look at it as more of an RPG instead? The Xenoblade series, which I think we can all agree is a bit less mainstream than Mario, has sold a combined 6.3 million units across 3 games on Switch, where the highest selling of these is Xenoblade 2 at 2.7 million. Nintendo seems to be happy with the sales of Xenoblade, so by that metric, maybe Mario RPG did pretty well. Similarly, Fire Emblem Three Houses sold about 4.12 million and was seen as a massive success for the series. But once again, that's Fire Emblem, a game sort of famous for not always selling very well, and a game that is very famously not Mario. We do have another Mario RPG series to compare against in Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which at last count had sold 3 million units and was evidently viewed as something of a flop. So once again, the context of sales expectations is everything in determining success. After all, if Nintendo budgeted development and marketing assuming that Mario RPG would sell, say, 2 million units, and then it wound up going over 3 million, that's a success. But if they were expecting more out of the combo of Mario branding and Super Nintendo nostalgia, then 3.31 million might be disappointing. Unfortunately, we just don't really know. We can only make guesses. But regardless, this train is already in motion. In May of 2024, about 7 months after Super Mario RPG, we got Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Now, we don't have official global numbers from Nintendo on this one yet. We should get those in August at their next earnings report. However, we do know that the last Paper Mario game, Paper Mario: The Origami King, wound up being the second best-selling game in the entire series at about 3.5 million units. Now, I would say it seems safe to assume that Nintendo would have similar, if not higher, expectations for a remake that so many people have been clamoring for years. So even if they're just expecting it to meet the sales of Origami King, it would put their expectations above the current sales of Mario RPG. And while yes, these games definitely each have their own audiences, there's also going to be a lot of crossover, and players who just finished Mario RPG may not be immediately ready to hop into Thousand-Year Door. So just meeting the sales of RPG is going to be a challenge, let alone exceeding them. Hopefully, I'll be wrong, and August will roll around with great sales numbers for both of these games. Now, a month ago, this is where I sort of figured this thought experiment and sales deep dive would end. But then Nintendo announced yet another RPG starring Mario. This is the one I am most concerned about. If Super Mario RPG on Switch didn't meet expectations, it isn't really a huge deal because it's a standalone game. It's not like because that one didn't sell well, now we're not gonna get Mario RPG 2. Even Thousand-Year Door isn't going to kill Paper Mario if it doesn't do that well. Because regardless of Thousand-Year Door, the series is ultimately in the best shape that it's been in since the Wii. But Mario and Luigi is a different story. This is a new game in a dormant series that had been on a death spiral for years before it finally got shelved. If Brothership doesn't give strong indications that the series is on the rebound from that spiral, I have to assume this is going right back on the shelf. And I'm worried that ultimately its struggle for relevance may not come down to its own merit, but to the baffling choice to release games from 3 parallel series within a year of each other. We saw a similar effect leading to lower sales in 2012 when Nintendo published 4 different Mario games, 2 of which were entries in the new Super Mario Bros. Series. Even Brothership's position as the only legitimately new game in this trinity may be dulled by marketing choices around Mario RPG and Thousand-Year Door. Both of those games were named as if they were new games. It wasn't Super Mario RPG HD, it was just Super Mario RPG. It wasn't Paper Mario Thousand-Year Door Deluxe, it was just Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. And assuming you weren't playing those games on their original consoles prior to being able to read, odds are for a lot of players under the age of 25 or so, or older if we're talking about Mario RPG, they essentially were indeed new games. I know it seems ridiculous to say that the lack of an HD or deluxe or remastered after a title could influence the sales of an entirely different game, but when you're pitching $180 worth of games that all play quite similarly to the same audience in the same year, those little psychological marketing choices wind up having a ripple effect. All that to say, I really, really hope Mario and Luigi Brothership does well. It looks awesome. That art is beautiful, and it's doing something new. It looks like a Mario RPG that is indeed a traditional RPG, which is exactly what fans claim to want. And here's my hot take. I saved it until the end, so hopefully you'd stick around to this point. I know people desperately want Paper Mario to go back to being more traditional RPGs, but I like that series is able to experiment and just sort of be weird. Now that being said, I also totally respect that people want the ideas behind that original Super Mario RPG to continue to exist. I would love to see Mario and Luigi be that, while Paper Mario can weave in and out of being a traditional RPG without having to feel like we're leaving anything behind. I just hope that an oversaturation of Mario RPGs doesn't suddenly kill this rebirth before it really has a chance to get going. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to Nintendo World Report TV. If you'd like to chat with me about any of this, you can feel free to reach out on your social media platform of choice using the handle on screen, and you can chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related in our Discord using the link in the description. My name's John Rairdin, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.